This is my Marcher Army, an arm of the 3rd Recon Division of the United States Army in this alternate timeline. This small reconnaissance detachment is on the outermost defense perimeter surrounding US territory, specifically to the north. Russian forces have taken over the area we now know in our world as Anchorage, Alaska, and Uncle Sam wants it. These are the snow wolves sent out to find weak points in the prey and open up the lines of attack for the US main army. As the borders of the US test its Russian neighbors with expansion, the 3rd Recon Division will be at the forefront of affairs in the icy north. This detachment is formed of a recon platoon and a support platoon. That is to say, we have a small unit of riflemen to support a combat engineer squad. Accompanying them is the real teeth of the reconnaissance force. They have a bite and hold strategy, and so the bite here is a pair of RIA light battle walkers outfitted with light buzzsaws. And the main event is the Lynx Battle Walker, with the 57mm battle cannon and sensory array. Collectively, this all goes together to form a highly mobile force that can spot enemies and intercept them while the main base is alerted and prepares. And so in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my small Marcher army. It's only 750 points, but it's a wonderful snapshot into how much value and hobby opportunity can be jam-packed into the smallest point level of this game. Welcome to my introduction or army spotlight of my US Alaskan Defense Force here. I was sent this army from the Marcher crew, and essentially they wanted me to paint up some of their minis. Makes sense. But I was like, this is my favorite of the theaters that they've created for the Marcher universe, and my favorite unit are the walkers. So give me a list that is just as much walker as you can, knowing it's a very small point. And they did not disappoint. The Lynx Battle Walker is probably one of my favorite miniatures that Golden Dragon puts out. It just has a great silhouette and profile to it. The light battle walkers have a lot of character as well. And, you know, when he talks about the army spotlight, to get to what I have now to play Marcher really just basically requires 3 miniatures, and that is the walkers, the cool things, right? If you yourself have a army force or whatever from like World War II, World War I games, you can convert them and make them work for Marcher. So you probably already have most of a list like this sitting around. And that's really what made Marcher seem so approachable to me, is that if you have any historical stuff, you just splash in some of the most ridiculously cool out there models, and then you have an army for a completely new game. Now, since this is a army spotlight, I want to talk a little bit about how I achieved this scheme. For all of the infantry, I primed them with Death World Forest. I think it's the Games Workshop primer, the darker green one, and then just picked out with some traditional paints, and then gave the whole thing a wash in Athonian camo shade, and with a few highlights here or there. The white is probably the thing I have the most practice with. My Stormcast Eternals for Games Workshop's Age of Sigmar game is also white armored, and so the way that I achieve that, this nice crisp looking white, is I prime them in white, basic flat white primer. I give them a heavy wash with Apothecary White, which is a contrast paint from Games Workshop. And this essentially creates sort of a light blue little shadow, a grayish bluish shadow that's going to fill in and give some definition to the white panels. I then took Silver Gray from AK Studios, cleaned up the majority of the panels so they're nice and solid colored, and then did a little bit of an edge highlight with, I think it's Trooper White by Two Thin Coats. This is the Duncan Rhodes painting studio paint. And this is like this perfect milky white. It looks like Stormtrooper armor, where it's not necessarily pure white. It's just a little bit off, which is great because then when the light hits it, you can get pure highlights. So highly recommend this one. I used a variety of metallics from a bunch of different companies. Honestly, metallics are probably the one where I care the least, because then I gave all the metals a big old wash to make them look a little oily, and cleaned it up with some, you know, little bits of debris here and there, and then of course the little sensor arrays and icons and stuff like that on the big battle walker. One of the things that I think is kind of a soft boon for this game, right? Like, let's say I'm going to do a dedicated video about how to get into Marcher, whether you are an existing hobbyist with historical stuff or brand new. What's great about them both is that it doesn't take much to get going. This is essentially 15 models and 3 cool, mechs. That's a very manageable hobby project. So when I put it all together with a very simple paint scheme, I'm going to get some decals in the mail here pretty soon. We're just going to tie it all together and make it look awesome. Let's move from the painting aspect and talk about how this army plays. When you play a game of Marcher and you start to build your army, essentially you're going to pick which theater of battle they're fighting in. A lot of historical games have something like this, and you can kind of use the rules thematically wherever you want, but generally speaking, rules for one section are meant to represent, this particular theater of war. It just so happens that my favorite miniatures, the walkers, line up with what the Alaskan, front is fighting with, meaning walkers are better suited to the climates and the treacherous terrain that exist up in the Alaskan battle zone than, say, tanks. So, when I start my army, I decide I'm going to be a US army. I'm going to pick the Alaskan Defense Force, which is going to give me a special rule that says I can take a bunch more walkers and they're much better than they usually are. Now, note here, any army in any war front has access to all of the options to my knowledge. So like you could be fighting, say, in Europe, in the European front, and have the battle walkers and they're not out of place. Even though they're just used more in the Alaska thing, they make sense everywhere. But for this force, let's break down what these units do now that we know we have a little bit of a focus on the walkers. Going through each unit's role, start at the bottom and work our way up in terms of coolness. We have our basic infantrymen. These guys are here to hold the line. That's it. Claim objectives, fight, shoot, and die. Now behind them is where we get a little bit more interesting, and that is the engineers. Marcher has a really cool setup where as you build your list, you're not just getting units, but the detachments you choose give you access to different resources. Sort of like in other games where if you take this detachment, you get so many command points kind of a thing. It's the model of the army influences the resources that army has. What that means for me is that if I take this, particular list, I will get requisition points, which I can then spend to have these engineers create terrain on the fly. Marcher is really cool, and one of the things that stood out to me when I first saw it at Adepticon was the engineering crew building barricades that the infantry can then move up and hide behind. So it's a unit that changes the battlefield as the game progresses, which is, again, it stood out to me as being very interesting. Now your engineers have a chance of creating these great firing lanes and fields of opportunity and defensive structures for you, but none of that really matters if you can't deliver some pain. And for that, we kind of move up the tier list here to the 2 light battle walkers. Let's be honest, these are essentially killicans brought into another timeline. 2 light walkers that have buzzsaw blades on them. They are meant to be highly aggressive. They are meant to run up, and so your opponent has to deal with them in some capacity, while they're also taking fire from the infantry, which is hopefully falling behind barricades built by the engineers. This is the aggressive arm of the army. Do I expect them to live through any of these battles? Absolutely not. But luckily, we have a corps of engineers right here to fix them up after each one. Now, the buzzsaw blades are not like the most incredible weapon to exist. However, if they are allowed to get into whatever their target is, essentially unharassed, they will mess something up. And of course, the big boy at the top is the Lynx Battle Walker. Again, one of my favorite miniatures. They have one Battle Walker that I believe is just a little bit bigger than this one, but I love this guy. He's got a heavy gun strapped to him with a bunch of sensors that basically allow him to fire more accurately, do more damage, that kind of stuff. So he's your big, slow, heavy gun of the faction. Like I said, I talked to the Golden Dragon game guys. I told them give me walkers. Give me all your walkers, basically. Because there was one picture that really inspired me and inspired the paint scheme for this army, and that is in particular this one, which is someone just standing in front of one of the walker mechs. It just has such an imposing and dark design to it. I couldn't help but fall in love with it. I was like, I want that. I want my opponent to feel that when I put this on the table. Once I get my Russian Empire army force all put together, I'm going to have these 2 duke it out in a battle report, and you'll be able to see exactly what I mean when I talk about the light walkers tearing into things. It's going to be a blast. Now I want to pivot into talking about Marcher as a community and getting started, because this is just my little 750 point army. Let's talk about how to do a full one and get engaged with the community. First of all, this really reminds me, like I said before, of just how doable a Marcher army is. Most of us, if you play any historical thing, already have most of an army, or at least an all infantry one, There you go. And you just need to pick up a few cool mechs or tanks or something like that to add a huge dose of character and a new army for an entirely new game. If you want to see some of the other projects that other incredible painters have done, please consider joining the Marcher Discord. I have a link directly to their Discord in the description down below for you. They're the most encouraging people in the hobby side that I have met online, and it's a very well-run Discord. If you own a 3D printer, check out the model range. I have a link to their My Mini Factory links down below. You can get those printed by third parties, of course. But I wanted to throw out there three, I guess, of my favorites. And since this is a US Army Spotlight video, we'll keep it to US units. But my three top picks, I'm going to throw them up on screen here. I have the Lynx Battle Walker, as you have seen. I showed a picture of that guy. Painted him up. He's a blast. There are the X-19 Badger hard suits. This is essentially this universe's innovation into mechanized armor, power armor. They have a huge imposing presence on the battlefield, especially compared to the tiny little infantry guys. And then right behind them, because I just love the look of them, are the drop troops. These are the US Command drop troops flying in on little personal jetpacks to deliver damage behind the enemy lines. Now, if you are in the Hopkinsville, Kentucky area between November 7th and 9th, there's actually a new convention going on called Phalanx Con. The guys from Marcher are going to be there giving demos, running an event. I highly suggest you go check that out, if for nothing else, to go learn about the game, see if there are any models that catch your eye, and engage with the guys giving demos, because I met them, the team at Adepticon, and they were just the most friendly dudes around. And if you're interested in seeing my my Russian Empire army as I put it together, please consider subscribing and following along for more Marcher content. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.